Okay, we did it. We did it.
We're here.
That's incredible, right? Uh, so, yeah, we had some issues a few days ago. We wanted to do this a few days ago, but we had some technical issues. But we did it this time. We found out the way to reschedule it, and Security Break is live once again. I think this is the 14th episode, which is pretty cool. And yeah, if this is the first time you watch this show, this is just a little project of mine. I'm Giorgio, by the way, and this is supposed to be a podcast where I invite cool people like Chris to talk about a bunch of recent security news and just discuss about them and possibly learn something on the process, just because I really think that aside of doing personally technical stuff, but even if you're doing something else in the industry, you have to keep yourself updated with what's happening in the wild or just out there, and sharing thoughts and knowledge and information with other peers from the industry, especially even outside your company. It's really enriching yourself. So yeah, that's just an excuse to do that for myself personally. And yeah, today I have together with me Chris Cochran. I hope I pronounced that correctly, actually.
Perfect.
uh, and yeah, Chris, would you mind just introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Chris Cochran. I'm a advisory CISO and chief evangelist at Huntress. I'm also the co-founder of Hacker Valley Media, where we do a lot of work in the creative space in cybersecurity, so making podcasts, videos. During my day job, what we do at Huntress is we support the 99% of folks out there that can't afford the top tier solutions out there, because we feel like everybody needs cybersecurity at the end of the day. And so we're supporting the folks that basically make up the backbone of our economy. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk about some of the emerging threats out there in the cyber world. And thanks for inviting me on, Giorgio.
Oh, thanks to you for joining me, actually. So yeah, that's it. That's great. So as I mentioned, the format is very simple. I'm going just to introduce one of the first news we're going to talk about today, and yeah, we'll start our chat about it. So everyone should be able to see my screen now. Just a second before we start, you're watching this live on Twitch right now, but I'm going to re-upload this episode together with all of the others we did already on YouTube, and all of those podcast platforms like Spotify and similar. So feel free to have a look at them and possibly click on those subscribe buttons, because it's really 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 helpful. So okay, first story of the day, and I thought this is something that we didn't speak about on this show so far. But from someone from the industry, it's something pretty niche, because not everyone is going to handle personally any activity like this. But it's definitely interesting to see and talk about this. So the story is about something that happened in Texas specifically, and three men, I believe, were arrested for a very very specific kind of crime, which involved exploiting ATMs, and in order to basically get money out of it, of course. And the interesting thing here is that apparently they used a bunch of Raspberry Pis. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a computer on a board. So a very very little. There are different models, but usually there are very little computers which are completely built in a single card. So that's it. You just have one single little device that you can hide anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can use for you know any kind of reason. Of course, there are a lot of very cool projects out there. Even a lot of them are basically open source. But of course, as with everything, attackers can use them as well, right? In this case, we don't have the details from the article, but that's not the point. The thing is that most of the time when you have to exploit a device like that, like an ATM, you really need to connect physically to the device, and use upload some malware or just connect to it and exploit some vulnerabilities in order to then send commands to retrieve money, right? So I think that's the best part of it, right? Attacking ATMs in order to get money. So it's not the common ransomware attack that we see most of the time in the news right now. It's something not something new, but we don't see this so much, and the usage of a device like that, right? I don't know. What's your first thoughts about this?
So my main thought about this is that, first of all, I'm glad that it was only, 5,700 bucks or whatever it was that was stolen. But what this does is this reminds us that these ATM heists, these jackpotting operations still occur, right? We
Yeah.
remember a little while ago when allegedly North Korea did, I think, you know, just north of $10 million in a jackpot operation. So this is just a reminder that these operations are still occurring. So there's still a little bit of work that we need to do on our end to make sure that these types of operations don't happen. Because imagine if there was another jackpot, situation where it was an entire criminal underground, across the world again, trying to pull money from one particular vendor or one particular bank or financial institution. That could be very damaging, especially if they're not able to recoup that money or arrest the perpetrators. So that just reminds me that we still have a little work to do on securing our ATMs and a little bit of work to do when it comes to jackpotting operations.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something that for me it's very interesting, right? We still see something like that. Again, it's not something that most of the time security practitioners have to work with. You have to be like in a specific environment, in banking environments, or maybe in those companies who actually develop and build those devices
Mm-hmm.
to work with them. And I think, at least for what I know personally, that the main problem there is that those devices are usually very, very old. Like the way
Oh
they are
yeah.
built, the operating system they have on board is not something that are a type of device that is really updated that often, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that has been, at least in the past, the main problem with it, because they really have a list of vulnerabilities that are not really patched or fixed, because it's really expensive to build them or to replace them,
Yeah.
not just updated them. And there's also the thing that I think that you really um, bet on the fact that attackers have to have physical access to them, right? It's not usually
Right.
something that you can just remotely exploit, because they are not, they should not be connected to a network, at least, but I think they are not all of the time. But still, apparently, there's not something that prevents attackers to do it, right? Um, uh, you know, uh, Actually, and now the second part of it, the usage of Raspberry, it's the
Yep.
perfect, the perfect thing, right? Because
It is.
of course, I think you always have like cameras pointing at the ATM for security reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot just go in there with a laptop or something very,
Yeah.
right?
It's a dead giveaway.
They're gonna see you, right? It's gonna be
Right.
suspicious. So you have to have something very small you can hide somewhere. I've seen in the past the usage of like of USB drives, USB drives, that if you have access to some USB ports, of course, um,
Mm-hmm.
this is perfect, right? This is pretty smart, I will say. um,
Yeah.
and yeah, as usual, Raspberry Pi in this time, it's just usage of a tool, because it's just a tool in a malicious
Yep.
way. And yeah, any tool can be used in a malicious way, even if it's built on a first at the first time, just for good reasons, right?
Mm-hmm. Raspberry Pi is very versatile. I mean, you could do so many different things with it. You can control robots. You can. It could be your own little personal computer. It could do things like this. I mean, it's just so versatile. You can't put any shade towards Raspberry Pi because it's just a tool at the end of the day, right? You can't get mad at the hammer because it's all in what you do with it. But
Exactly.
then the point you bring up about it's really tough for financial institutions to go rip and replace all of these ATMs. You're right. I mean, if you're a financial institution that has 10,000 ATMs out there in the world, you're going to have a sliding scale of different operating systems and hardware specifications that you're going to have to keep track of. And I'm sure it's tough to not only keep track, but then to say, like, up, these particular systems are going to be end of life because of X, Y, and Z. They're going to push them as hard as they can to get as much mileage out of those machines as possible. And when you're dealing with something that happens as fast as technology, it's going to be really hard to keep up with it and be able to mitigate any of those vulnerabilities that you can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Like again, if you are already a security practitioner, you know how difficult it is just to keep updated normal servers and computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a normal
Yeah.
environment, I say normal just because it's the most common one you see, in any organization. A bunch of possibly 90% of the time you also have Windows servers on a specific
Mm-hmm.
version, and it's already very very difficult for a number of reasons for the just the number of devices you have in there, the way they are segregated, the way you have to access them, if you have the privilege to do that, if all the softwares that are installed in them are have any updates available, because that depends on the various vendors, not only the operating
Mm-hmm.
system but all of the individual softwares that are installed in there, or if you actually have some custom softwares in it, right? You are, as an organization, responsible for creating those patches, other than finding out about the vulnerabilities themselves. And when
Mm-hmm.
you have this kind of devices that probably, like, I don't think they are categorized as IoT, but I think it's a similar kind of scenario, right? Because you have
Right.
um, you know uh, weird devices with custom installation of some operating systems, that are using maybe custom protocols and everything that are placed in segregated networks, or they are not connected at all. So an operator has to go physically to all of them and try to update them, or maybe you cannot update it at all, and you actually have to replace the device, which means buying a new one from the vendor. And I definitely expect these devices to be really really expensive, right? Because they are so niche, so specific, that only financial institutions need them. So I don't really know how much it could cost. I remember a conference at some point, like a speech at the conference I was looking at, which this guy actually bought one from eBay or something, like a used
Mm-hmm.
one, and it was already um, yeah, thousands of dollars, right? So if you said it, if you had 10,000 of them around the world and you have to install them, if you think about even the people that you have to pay to install them and everything, it's a mess. It's completely a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I don't remember reading this in the article, but did they say what the interface was that they used the Raspberry Pi? Did they plug into some USB port like in the ATM, and then how did they get to the USB port?
So unfortunately, it's not specified. Okay, the article is not very
Mm-hmm.
technical. What is specified is that they catch those people, and they basically find out about all of the tools they used, and they found
Mm-hmm.
about a bunch of those Raspberry Pi. So allegedly, those were the ones that they used, and it's
Right.
actually, yeah, you said that they just got like a couple of thousands of dollars, not very much. I believe
Right.
they actually were just caught very early in the process,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, it definitely can be so worse than that. And it has been previously with other similar campaigns. So this time it was a good case, but that's the point. If this happened in Texas, from those three people, which at least not specified, they're not part of any, a big group of malicious actor or something. We know that the same thing can happen anywhere else in the world. It's still a
Yep.
thing, right? And can still be a big threat for a big number of financial institutions there. So just one of those, of course, you have already to watch out for so many threats
Yeah.
at your normal network infrastructure, and you also have to think about this. So
Yeah. One thing I'll say about this is it's very plausible that these individuals were able to craft this on their own and duplicate, or create some type of mechanism, upload it to a Raspberry Pi, and then execute the operations. But there's also the potentiality of this being a dark web market situation where you can just go buy this tool and upload it to a Raspberry Pi. And I mean, it could even be more sophisticated than that, where it's a marketplace, an entire marketplace where people are able to go and buy all of these different exploits to use for nefarious purposes. And so you're right. If this is something that's as a service, or this is something that people can just buy on the marketplace, this might pique the interest of other folks, maybe even more organized, maybe more prolific in different countries, and they might try to utilize this to do their own jackpotting operation.
yeah, so this is actually something that we discussed multiple times in the previous episode, right? That everything in the last years is shifting, especially on cybercrime in general, is shifting to anything as a service, right?
Yep.
Where you don't really have to, get any kind of skills, or you don't really have to be really high hand in the, with technology and everything, because technically you can look, on the dark web and find for anything if you are able to pay for it. And most of the time you are, because it's not really expensive, because it's something that those providers, let's say, really plan to get as many customers as possible, right? So most of those solutions, most of those thing as a service that you can find are very very cheap, like anyone can really afford them. So I will also expect that in this case they didn't really build this themselves. It could be, but it's definitely more probable that they just bought it, right? Or they
Mm-hmm.
bought an exploit and just adapted to be used on the Raspberry thing. And yeah, the problem right now is that the bar is so low. Like anyone
Mm-hmm.
can really perpetrate something that we will say some years ago that will be very sophisticated. Right now it's not sophisticated at all, because you can buy a bunch of stuff or just pay someone to build something for you, right? And you just have to be the
Yep.
person which goes in there and physically access to the device and get the money, which is the probably the riskier part. But still
Yep.
you don't have to be a tech guy or anything. So
Mm-mm.
that's
Nope,
scary.
not at all. That is scary.
Okay, so don't know what you think, but we can probably move to the next news
Let's do it.
already. So just a little reminder again, you are free to join us and participate in the conversation here on Twitch. Just write in the comments. We are having a look at the chat, so feel free to do that. Otherwise, just rewatch the video on YouTube and leave a comment in there. Any feedback will be much appreciated. So, second story here. This is definitely a bit sad. Like, it's
Yeah.
most of the time it's sad when it comes to attacks in general to any organization or person. But this is a particular one. So, uh, a specific group called I will pronounce this Bayan Lion. I'm not sure,
Mm-hmm.
but this one basically, and this is something that again happened very 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 commonly, where the actors themselves, after they perpetrated an attack, they have their own website on again on the dark web most of the time, where they communicate to the public that they breached some company, right, or some organization, or something on where they are going to claim to be responsible for it, and yeah, basically declare, okay, we breached this network, we collected this amount of data, or this kind of data, and if the company is not going to pay us,
Right.
we are going to publish it or to sell it or whatever. It's just a way to push the company basically to pay for a ransom. Very tiny but interesting thing. This is usually what most of the time happens with ransomware, where actors actually encrypt the target networks, and
Hmm.
basically disrupt the organization, so that the company is basically losing money just because it's not working at all until they pay for the ransom. But recently there was a shift where all of those ransomware gangs started to also you know um, publish the data they were collecting
Yeah.
before encryption. And now there's even a further step, where this group started to just publish the data without even encrypting,
Right.
which seems to be it's more effective on their side probably. Otherwise, they will not do it. And yeah, this is something we see very often. But the point here, that this time the target of the attack, so the thing where the organization from where the data was stolen, it's actually a very well-known non-profit organization called Save the
Hmm.
Children. Probably all of you will know about it. And this is the other thing. This is the mind-blowing thing, if you want. The thing that no one can say that I'm not a target. Definitely, this is
Right.
the ultimate, if you ask me, proof that anyone, right, anyone can be a target. And
Yep.
we are talking about cybercrime. We're talking about criminals. Maybe not all of them, but a part of them will not have any problems targeting anyone. This group
Right.
is actually pretty well known to attacking hospitals and critical infrastructure. So they want to do damage, and they have no problems at all in doing that. So this should make a lot of people really think about it.
100%. When I think about criminals, it's funny because it seemed like a little while ago, I would say not every single criminal organization has morals or ethics or anything like that, but it did seem like there were more criminal organizations that did have ethics than today. It seems like the more access that criminals have access to exploits and software, ransomware as a service type services, they're people with less morals that are able to execute across the board. So then you have people that are targeting hospitals. You have uh, just like this, Save the Children being affected. And now it's just like, hey, we're just going to hit every single target that we can, regardless of what they do in operations, and which is a really, really scary thought. The other thing it makes me think about is that when you're looking at something like this, they're obviously going to say, like, whether it's ransomware or you're going to just take that information and hold it hostage and say, hey, we're going to leak your data if you don't give us the money. I think that this group turn to, hey, let's just focus on the information, because it probably shortcuts things a little bit. Because if you're dealing with both a ransomware operation and sort of like a smash and grab data, now you're having to juggle two different operations, where an organization could have backups, they could have really good business continuity practices, where the ransomware probably just gave them a little bit of a headache for a day or so. But if you wholeheartedly take all that information and say, hey, we have your information hostage. So I think that's what this group was doing. They were just trying to shortcut it. It does seem like they do dabble back into ransomware, but it did seem like they pivoted to just the smash and grab information and holding that for ransom at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also thinking that, uh, in terms of this is, of course, my point of view as an analyst in this industry. Um, if we talk about identification, right, or detection,
Hmm.
the point is that if the attacker is going to drop a ransomware, at that point, you will notice it, right? The problem
Right.
is, of course, we are all trying to prevent. We are all trying to, make sure attackers, do not really get into our network. But at some point, when they will, because they will, you want really to identify the threat as soon as possible, because you can contain damage, you can try to eradicate them as soon as possible, and prevent even more damage to be done to your network. And the point is that the ransomware itself, the encryption itself, it's very noisy, right? You notice that
Right.
your servers stop working out, or that your employees cannot really do anything anymore, or they cannot just access their data and everything. So even if you are not really, let's say, very mature with your security posture and everything, that's the step where you will definitely get to know about the attack. And
Hmm.
the point that possibly this messenger thing is more effective for the ransom thing. You want really to be, as an attacker, you want really to be as stealth as much as possible, so that you can
Right.
collect as much data as possible. Because the more data you collect and exfiltrate, the more the organization will be, unfortunately, willing to
Hmm.
pay the ransom, right? So I think that
Yep.
that's also going to be part of it. If you are going just for the exfiltration, you can be more stealthy, right? And
Yep.
take your time, find out about as many hosts in the network as possible, find out about all of those file servers, the database servers, and you can silently collect all of those data. I think specify how much data they collected this time. I think it's yeah, around 7 terabyte, which
Yeah.
is a lot, definitely a lot of
A
data.
lot of
And
data.
of different kind. I'm reading here HR files, personal data, which is very concerning, especially for the kind of organization that we are talking about, financial
Hmm.
records. So that really means that they took their time to find out all of the different places where those data were stored, because you don't have just a most of the time you don't have just a single device where everything is stored. Everyone has their own application where to store the data. So it takes time, and you want, as an attacker, to be stealth in the process. So maybe just dropping the ransomware thing is for that reason. Could be,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, I remember seeing things back in the day where you would have an organization that was breached, and then the attacker were able to pull information, and then what they would do is they would send snippets of the information to the target, to the victim, to say, "Hey, this is the type of data that we have access to." When you're stealing 7 terabytes worth of information, you can snip the juiciest bits and say, "This is what we have access to," and that's going to push the victim to do whatever that person wants. I mean, because a lot of times when we talk about data breaches, we talk about, oh, it was this much data, but what exactly is the data that it was taken? And if they're able to show that, hey, we have some controlled data, we have regulated data that we have in our possession, that's really going to get the attention of the potential victim. So I think that these types of operations are going to continue. They're going to continue to spread and get more ridiculous as time goes on, because at the end of the day, controlling our data is one of the most important things we have to do as businesses. And if we lose that control, not only did we hurt the people that we are trying to support, but we sort of hurt the reputation of the business, right? Because there are people who are going to be less likely to do business with us, to support us, if we can't maintain their data.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think is very interesting, like the fact that in the end, attackers really want to push the organization to pay the ransom, right? And they're
Hmm.
going to try everything, like as you said, just trying to publish, just little snippet of what they got, I've seen in the past, like doing like different steps. Like I'm gonna share about just 1 terabyte of data or a few gigabytes of data just
Hmm.
to demonstrate I have the data, right?
Right.
Because they could claim something that they don't really have, of course. uh,
Exactly.
that's the thing about criminals. You don't have to trust criminals, first of all.
Yeah.
So that's not, the fact that attackers, or especially ransomware gangs right now, are so public, are so much talking with the public, and have their own sites and their own blogs and everything. I think is pushing a little bit the industry to just blindly trust them and everything they say, right? What they did, what they have, and everything. But that's not true. Unfortunately, often it is true, but that doesn't mean that you have to trust them, right? You're
Right.
still handling with some criminals. So just to still have a find a way to push the organization to pay, they could just publish, I don't know, just the HR files, so that
Hmm.
you see what I have is actually what I said. And if you don't pay right now, I'm gonna publish the rest of the data. And maybe they can, usually what happens, not that I'm suggesting to anyone to do that, but usually in the process that they are, how do they say, just finding a way to make the organization to pay, like making the attackers to ask less money, for example, compared to what they
Hmm.
asked at the beginning. So
Right.
it's something that they know how to do it. They know how to push the company, and maybe also making a time on it. Like, you have to pay me in few days, or you have to pay the entire, like, some money first, and then you can pay it the rest after a week or something. So it's a process they got really good, right, to do it,
Hmm.
because eventually they want the money. That's the reason why they do it. They don't really want to publish
Absolutely.
the data and get any money, right?
Right.
So definitely they are trying also to help the organization. That's like a paradox, but they're trying to help the organization to find the money, to get the way to pay, because they are also mostly all the time asking to pay in cryptocurrency, right? And most of the organization are not really getting their wallets full of cryptocurrency, so they have to buy them and everything. So they are also teaching, right, how to do that kind of stuff, which is funny, right? But if you that just demonstrate once again how much they are advanced in this kind of stuff. It's a business, it's a job for them, right?
Oh yeah, I talk about this all the time. There are ransomware gangs that not only do they put out calls for papers, like for conferences, basically, like for criminals. They're like, hey, any criminals out there that's doing really good research, we're going to pay you for your research. They even have call centers where, like, hey, if you need help, paying your ransom, figuring out how to use Bitcoin, making sure that you get your key and all that stuff. We got an entire team for that. We have seen different groups that have HR, right? They have code of conduct. They have different manuals for their employees to use. They have employees of the month. I mean, these are real criminal enterprises that are acting like businesses. Because they are a business. Just because they're doing something illegal doesn't make them a business. They're an illegal business. So they're going to continue to push into these operations, get more efficient, get more effective. They're going to recruit people to do more because they're making money. This is an operation that works time and time again. So the more they're going to invest, the more they're going to get out of the victims across the board.
Okay, so next story. This is again pretty niche, pretty, yeah,
Mhm.
interesting. Not something that you see very often. Actually, the specific technique I'm going to talk about, I didn't know about it before reading this. So again, that's what I mean when I say, reading, just reading news is something that really helps in your, I think, in your development as a practitioner, right? Because you get to know new stuff, you deep dive in that, you do a bunch of research, and yeah, you just are a little better than few minutes before. So
Right.
that's I just hope that just us talking about this kind of stuff and the people listening or watching, they will get to know something new. They will do their own research, just not trust us just because we say something, but just do your research, double check, and we all get better all together. So I think that's the spirit behind the um, behind this podcast. So this
Yep.
time we're talking actually once again about GitHub. GitHub is something that we mention pretty often in this podcast, but this time we are going to talk about a very specific technique that can affect GitHub repositories. So again, if you don't know about GitHub, it's basically a platform mainly for developers where they can upload their own code, their own open source code, or just
Hmm.
internal organization they can use them that internally just for storing the code, tracking the versions of the code, and just help multiple developers work at the same project all together, right? So it's plenty of different kind of projects and softwares. It's probably the most used platform of that kind on the internet.
Hmm.
And there are so many softwares and projects that so many people and organizations use in their own internal infrastructure. So this is a premise that is important to say. Now the kind of attack that is being let's say discovered by a researcher this time is what they called repojacking. So basically,
Hmm.
it's trying to exploit an existing repository that is very well known and that possibly many people are already using in their in their work, in their projects, and try to get people to connect to the wrong, right, to some repository that is disguising it as the legitimate one, and possibly just making download the malicious code instead of the legitimate one, just because
Right.
that you think you're connecting to the right one, but actually the same name you're connecting to me is making you download the malicious code. Now this is
Hmm.
thing. I think I still have to do some research, just research myself to get to know a little better about this. But for what I understand, basically, using the API provided by GitHub itself, you can try to detect whenever someone is just changing the name of its username on GitHub, right?
Right.
And if you get the exact moment when the repository X is changed their name, basically you can try to replicate the old name with a new
Hmm.
username, right? And calling your repositories with the same repository name of the previous one. Basically, anyone which is directly going to the old name is going to actually the malicious new repository, right? And
Right.
this is particularly concerning because if we apply this to very well-known repositories online where people are constantly downloading or connecting to without really double checking every time they do it, you can just be tricked by this very, very easily, right? It's basically, I will say, just another phishing way to get to attack people, right?
Right.
So it's very interesting, very niche, but at the same time, so many developers out there can be affected by it that
Right.
probably everyone should know about this, and it's not the case. I will say. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't say everybody knows about this at all. And I would say of the articles that we're talking about today, this is probably the one I would really know the least about. But I would say that it's very similar to a watering hole attack. But I would say that there is a degree of luck and timing that has to go into this particular attack if someone were to use it for malicious reasons. So they would have to know that, hey, this popular repo and the user tied to it just changed their username, and so I'm going to snag the original username to try to set up a watering hole attack in order to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like you were saying, download this, source code that actually has some hidden utilization that might do something nefarious. So I think at the end of the day, would this be hard to use in an actual attack? It probably would be really, really difficult to use, but it's still an attack vector that you have to consider when it comes to these things, because there are a lot of folks out there that are doing everything they can to take our data, take our money. So if this is still something that people can do, then people are going to try to leverage it in any way they can.
Yeah, and this particular technique to exploit this, I think was actually fixed, right? Since it was a
Mm.
researcher discovering it, and they did how they say it, responsible disclosure. So basically, they found out
Right.
about the vulnerability. They communicated to the organization itself, so GitHub in this case, so they could fix the vulnerability, and then just after they fixed it, they could talk about it, publicly. But the real problem that I think it's also pretty specified in the article, and the researcher said it, is that this is not the first time they found about something like this. There were similar vulnerabilities, still related to repojacking, that were found
Yeah.
in the last years, and it started to be a pretty common thing to find about, right? Because the problem is more the kind of technique in general, just getting to know about that something like this can happen, maybe in another way, maybe exploiting another kind of vulnerability that could be simpler, or just maybe a little more difficult. The thing is that, as everything, getting to know that something like this is possible, and you have to double check your repository names when you download something from it, even if that's a very famous one, and you know about the developer, maybe it's a friend of yours, and you just trust them blindly, right? It can still
Yeah.
be someone else which is disguising as that developer, right? So I think
Right.
that's we should get from it, that maybe there's another vulnerability we don't know about yet, but that the eventually the result will be the same, right? Or something similar to this. Just the fact that
Yeah.
something like this can happen, it's already a very important information, I think, right?
Yeah, 100%. And this could even be used in a supply chain attack, right? If there's a dependency, maybe there's an open source code repository that has a lot of dependencies that other applications use. If you're able to then swap in your evil repository for the original one, and then now all of those other organizations or solutions or code banks, whatever you're looking at, are going to leverage that evil code. Now you might have a bigger problem. You might have a similar problem to like Log4j, right? There's a lot of things that could happen if someone were to replicate this in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, that's probably the biggest threat here. The fact that you don't really have to manually download the code. You're maybe already using this code because it's hard written somewhere, that you are using, the library someone put on GitHub for your own code, right? And
Mm.
you know, I think again, somewhere in the article, they say, yeah, they have identified over 4,000 packages that could have been target of this kind of attack in the past, um, which has very, very common packages used by thousands of people, because you can see from GitHub, how many times it has been downloaded, or people have
Right.
used them. So I think that's the biggest problem. What if that same GitHub code or GitHub repository is used automatically by some software out there? Like, you have your
Yeah.
script with your uh, yeah, just hard written in there, download from this repository the dependencies for what you really need, and you don't really check your old code every day to see if all of the
Yeah.
repositories are correct, right?
Right.
It's true that GitHub say that they put a redirection, so that you don't really have to break everything every time you change the name. But there's also the thing that causes the problem, right? In this
Yeah.
specific case. So I think
Hmm.
that's the biggest challenge. Like, do you, as an organization, again, review everything you have written in the past, all of the dependencies you are using, see if you are using anything open source, and whether those open source softwares are still just delivering the same legitimate software, or anyone has hijacked that in some way, and the same legacy repository is now delivering some sort of malware inside the code. I think that that's a big problem. And you mentioned
Yeah.
Log4j, right?
Yep.
It has been a very a big issue concerning an open source library out there, and I think it made very clear just something very small built by some open source community is is the base where so many organizations there are actually developing their own softwares out there. So a very big, very tiny issue in a very small piece of code can cause problems to thousands of organizations around the world, and that's crazy, right? If
Hmm.
someone can also not just find a vulnerability, but introduce some vulnerabilities or introduce some malicious actions that same software can do, that's it. That's jackpot. You will never
Yep.
detect it if you are not really, and no one is really checking all of their internal code every day or something. Um, that's
No, no one's doing that. It's too much work. It's just way too much work. And then it even makes me think about human beings at the end of the day. One of the things that the human brain does really well is it tries to be as efficient as possible. Even let's say we were in the spirit of checking all of our repositories all the time. At a certain point, your brain is going to say, "We've checked this repository every single day for the last 365 days, and we have not had an issue." Your brain's going to start to de-escalate that process. It's going to say, we're gonna see, we see the pattern, we've been checking this repository and nothing's happening. So it's going to start to quiet down those alarm
mm,
bells when it comes to those particular checks. Our mind does this all the time because it's trying to be as efficient as possible. It's trying to use that energy, it's trying to use those calories to do things that are going to help us with survival, help us with other people, help us with our community. If there's something we're doing that isn't paying dividends, our bodies, our brains are going to try to diminish what that thing is.
yeah, and even let's say that you are Alf Robot or something, and even if you really do that, the point is that that's too much data to review. So there's
Right.
just not enough time, not enough resources to do it. I know there are some solutions out there to try to automate this process, to review all the code. I'm not really sure how much they are effective or if these are really being used, because I think there's also an issue where you don't want to get access to your internal code to something from third parties, right? Because it's still
Right.
some very sensitive information. Like, if you are a vendor, if you are selling the software, and you are pushing your source code to a third party, I don't know, cloud storage for analysis, maybe, just assuming here, don't really know exactly how they work, but still can be an issue. And I don't know how much they cost. So not all of the organizations are able to do that, even with the automated solutions, I think. So it's
Mhm.
very, very difficult. You will have to maybe build something like that on your own, but that's other code you will have to review and check. So it's
Yep.
really probably,
Yep.
yeah, I will say that's probably one of the biggest challenges out there, like reviewing the source code for just issues of any kind, just because it's too much work, really too much work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and that's where trust comes in, right?
Yeah.
You do as much due diligence as you can when you're using code, when you're bringing on partners, vendors, anything. But at the end of the day, there's a degree of trust that you have to put into the things that you're utilizing. Sure, we can trust but verify as much as we want, but at the end of the day, we only have so much bandwidth, we only have so much resources to do the things that we're trying to do, and so sometimes you have to trust the things that you're utilizing.
Absolutely. So I think that's it for this story as well. We're going to the very end of this episode. Unfortunately for me, but at least I can get Chris free of from here. Just for the last time, a little reminder: if you're watching this, if you are enjoying this just a little bit, please consider to hit that subscribe button or just share it with someone that you think you will enjoy as well, because that's it. That's the reason why we're doing this. If other people are watching, listening, commenting, now this is working as expected. Now even other people are learning in the process, not just myself. And that's a community thing. So the more people engage, the more this will be effective, and I will know that I just have to continue doing this, right? So it's very cool, and thank you very much if you do that. So going to the very end of this, maybe Chris, you don't know, but I usually try to leave the most, let's say, interesting or big thing to the very end, right?
Yeah.
And usually that's also going to be the name of the episode that I still have to choose. But
Right.
here I think that what it's mostly discussed in the last week or in the last days,
Mm-hmm.
it's this I don't know if I should call it data breach, but let's say this attack to MGM. I think that's correct, right? And that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know about it, but it's apparently it's the company behind a lot of casinos and hotels, especially in Las
Yes.
Vegas, right?
It's
So
huge.
it's yeah, pretty big organization, definitely, and behind different brands of this kind. Um, so what they noticed is that, or at least what their customers notice, is that a lot of their services just stopped working suddenly. And we are talking about getting access to your hotel room via your card, basically. Or if you are actually playing at the casino, your slot machine stopped working, and maybe you won something and the money is not uh, going out or anything, because nowadays we know that every organization is deeply digitalized, and it's based on computer systems, even those kind of systems. And uh, let's say I also read somewhere that even with the parking lots there were some issues. You could get stuck because you cannot exit, for example, the parking, and you have to go somewhere. So
Mm.
this can definitely cause some physical issues to a lot of customers, because this is a very big organization. Now this is the first part of the story. That could be something
Yeah.
that we read about multiple times, yet another company that was breached. But the point is that how it was actually breached, right? Because there are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
articles out there. Um,
Right.
we didn't know in the first place what really happened. And the fact is that at some point, a very well known research group called VX Underground posted on, they call it X right now, basically on Twitter, um, that they spoke with the attackers that did this breach right here, and they described exactly how they got in the network. And
Mm-hmm.
the interesting thing is that uh, apparently it was a very easy but smart approach, where
Right.
they did some research, I will say some audit research on LinkedIn, to find out about some employees from MGM.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently they impersonalized that person. They called
Yep.
the help desk of the company, and that was it, right? Just asking to get access to the account. Now we don't really know all the details, but we know
Right.
that basically social engineering, that they the way they did the initial access. Now I want to specify something here, because now there are so many people out there that are just saying, okay, they did some just social engineering, and that was it. That the company was already broken. Now I don't think it's that easy, right? Because after they got in, they had still to lateral move. They still to find out about the
Yeah.
network, and did a different chain of steps to get to their final goal, right? That
Yep.
eventually, apparently, it was actually delivering a ransomware this time that disrupted the network. So I think it's there are two different point of views here. Like, yeah, from a first point of view, how it is simple, it could be simple to get the initial full step in the network, just social engineering something. And on the very other hand, this is just not the just that's not just it. The company actually didn't identify the attack when it was ongoing, and it wasn't really fast enough to block it. Before the most part of the damage was perpetrated, right?
Hmm.
We are, I think even some security practitioners out there are forgetting about the kill chain, right? So the
Yep.
attacker has to do a list of different steps in order to reach out their final goals, whatever that be, again, exfiltrating or delivering a ransomware, or anything like that. And the organization has to find a way to identify the attack as soon as possible, of course, right? Because
Right.
sooner you get that, the less damage you will face. Of course, if you prevent it, it's better. But we know
Yep.
there's no such thing as 100% security. Any company
Exactly.
will potentially be breached, but the sooner you identify and stop the attack, the better it is. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because I think it has been simplified a little too much, right?
Yep.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
it's definitely being simplified, over the top simplified, because this group, I think it's Scattered Spider. I'm not sure. At least I think I read that. Scattered Spider is known for doing these operations against different casinos and big businesses. So you're definitely not dealing with someone that's really simple. It wasn't someone that just stumbled upon this person's LinkedIn and impersonated them, and then created all this havoc. This was somebody that really knows what they're doing, right? They utilize social engineering to get access, and they made things happen. We were talking earlier in this show. We were talking about how sometimes the original ask gets lowered. I think it was against Caesars, if I remember correctly. It was Scatter Spider, where they did a ransom for, I think it was like $30 million, and allegedly they worked their way down to 15. So we know that there are criminal actors that are looking for whales, right? The
Yeah,
big ticket items, and this is another one of those instances. But the other thing that this paints for me, and I've always thought about this, all throughout all my years in cybersecurity, is that if you let's say it wasn't someone that was impersonating an employee, maybe it was an actual employee. I'm not saying in this case, but let's say there was an employee that was disgruntled in any organization in the world, and you had someone approach them and say, hey, if you could give us this access, if you could plug in this USB, if you could give us this particular AWS key, we'll give you, a few $1,000s, and you get to kick your teeth by doing it. There are people that could give that type of access, enable this type of operation across the board. So I would say, number one, if this was any organization, I'm not saying that this was an inside job in this particular case, but any organization really needs to take care of their people, because if you have disgruntled employees, people, they don't feel like they're being supported, they're not being heard, they're not being respected. You're going to have potential insider threats across the board. And so I would say from that perspective, it makes me think about that insider threat as well.
absolutely. And you actually made me think about something that I didn't think before. Like, okay, once again, um, like we are just blindly trusting what the attacker is saying, right? So we
Right.
know that this was social engineered in that way because someone from the attacker group said that. And I
Right.
understand, it's VX Underground. that it's saying, okay, this is actually trustworthy because we know about this group, this is what they do and everything. But once again, what about, as you said, there was actually an insider threat that they are
Right.
covering because they still can use it again in the future, right? And
Exactly.
the organization doesn't know about it. Maybe now they will deploy a list of different security measures in order to prevent further attacks in the future, but still that inside threat is still there. Again, just
Hmm.
assumptions here, no clues this is the case.
Yep.
Most probably it's not actually the case, but that's
Right.
something that could happen, if not right now with this case, with another case tomorrow. So yeah, again, it's just something that okay, social engineering is already something that anyone could fall for, right? We are humans, we
Yep.
have our own vulnerabilities as humans. They are just called in other ways biases, by the way. But the point is that there are just so many different ways an attacker could get in, right? And there's not such a thing as 100% prevention, right? No organization
Right.
can do that, right? This is just how things work. And in this case, what this way, in another case, will be another different way. The point it is, when you fail to prevent, because you have to work on prevention, but at some point you have to work also on the other steps and to know about what's really happening inside your environment, and try to block them as soon as possible. I think there's a lot work to be done on that side, right? And many organizations, they have to improve on that aspect so much. And I understand also that one is not really simple, especially if you have a massive network like surely MGF does. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely something that you as an organization has to do. Yeah, I don't know if maybe it's a bias of mine again, because it's my job, right? To
Right.
identify the threats. But I really think um, you know uh, that's the most concerning thing for me about this case, right? They could not prevent, for sure, right? That's something that will eventually happen if they find the right person, or just someone tired that was in charge of the help desk at that point. So they could fall for it. There's not something as, okay, I patched the guy so they will not fall for the phishing attempt. But
Right.
they could identify the attack a little earlier, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that in this particular attack, every day that MGM was down was like $25 million, which is not a low amount of money by any stretch of the imagination. So it made me wonder. I really need to see all the details. I hope eventually all the details come out as to how everything unfolded. Because I mean, on the outset, if you're just looking at things in big social media, you're like, okay, so there was some type of social engineering attack, and then the entirety of MGM pretty much shuts down, right? Everything, and it almost sounds like there might have been a decision, and this is, I don't know this for sure, but there might have been a decision to start to shut things down preemptively so that there wouldn't be a bigger problem. I'd be curious to hear what went on in this war room, where it's like, look, this is such a big problem that we're going to have to just shut all this down just to be safe. Or was it a situation where the attacker was everywhere and the only recourse that they had was to shut everything down? I really don't know, but I'm really curious to see how it all unfolded.
Yeah, actually, for those who are curious, I think just yesterday or a few days ago, still the group that I think it's Half V. Um, they basically posted once again their version of what happened, and apparently there are some details in there. I didn't want really to bring in that, because again, I don't just want to blindly trust what the attackers say. But there are some details about what they did, what the organization tried to do while the attacker were inside. And yeah, that's there's some interesting fact in there. And now this could be another interesting aspect, like the communication during an incident, right? like
Hmm.
you, everyone, especially security practitioner, wants to know more about the incident and what happened, how the attacker did their stuff and how the organization responded, because you can learn from it, right? And of course the organization is responsible for that as well, not just the technical response to the incident but also the communication about it, and that's a big part
Right.
of it, for at least to contain the reputational damage, I would say.
Hmm.
But what happens when you have to consider that you're not the only actor communicating about it right now? Potentially the attackers has the same, if not a bigger and better reach when talking about that specific incident. Like, okay, if I talk about anyone, like any like to any person, will you trust more like the company was to not exactly say all the damages they faced with that specific incident, or the attacker that actually really wants to describe every single step they want to they did, so that can demonstrate how good they are in what they do. So there are two different
Yep.
versions of the same story possibly, and you don't really
Right.
know which one to trust more, or if any of those actually. There's
Yep.
a further challenge for the communication part, that yeah, it's already a mess by itself, right?
Hmm. Yep. It makes me think of Jack Rosider, a good friend of mine and somebody you've already had on your show. He calls himself a slow news junkie because he
Yeah.
waits till the very end to talk about anything. He waits for someone to get arrested, or maybe even they've been arrested and already got out of jail before he even pulls the entire story together. But I mean, that's the thing about cybersecurity, that things are happening so fast. You kind of have to stay on your toes. And sometimes you'll never get the entire story. But yeah, it's just one of those wait and see type of situations.
Yeah, that's something that you really have to, during the fact, it's really difficult that you get to know all of the real events, right? Just because it's
Right.
happening too fast, just because you have to manage the communication, and of course all of the parties have their own interest in how they communicate it.
Yeah.
So again, sure, also this project here, we are reading just a bunch of news. We are not really doing a lot of if you want fact checking and everything, because I think personally it's more on the learning on on top of what really happened. It's not about, okay, this really happened. It's more on, if this happened, what I can learn from it, right? But
Right.
if you want to know the real story, of course Jack knows better than anyone else. You have to really get in touch with the people that were involved, not just
Yep.
probably to just some communication officer that writes a cool story to to contain the damage from the company. That's what they do.
Right.
That's what they have to do, right? But yeah, it's a different thing. The real story to what they get as information, most of the time it's really different, and most of the time we don't really get to know everything, never, right? Because if no one is going to really deep dive and reach out to the people and find out all of the different actors involved, it's really difficult to find out what happened. I just thinking out loud, I'm reading right now the Mastermind, which is a very very cool book reconstructing all the events around a pretty big cyber criminal, or Spam Nation, right? Another book that is really
Hmm.
investigating and reaching out to so many people. It's a very difficult job to do, and
It
still you
is.
never know the full story yet, I think,
You don't.
right? So
Yeah. They say there's my side of the story, there's your side of the story, and then there's the truth. And sometimes you'll just never get there.
yeah, absolutely. So just a reminder to everyone. Reading an article doesn't mean exactly know the real facts, what happened, and the real, even extension of what happened. Maybe you get to know even just a little part of it. it's not false information, but you don't know the full story, which changes completely maybe the sense of it, right? So this is an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so don't know what you think, Chris. I definitely think it was very very interesting talking with you, reading
Yeah.
this kind of events. This was actually a pretty interesting week. There were so many other articles that I had to just drop because I cannot take
Yeah.
everything. We don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But I really, really appreciate your time joining next year. And I really hope that this episode was interesting for, of course, people who are going to watch this. Just as a reminder, Twitch, YouTube, or Spotify, and similar platforms. I really hope you enjoyed it as well, Chris.
I had a
Um,
great time. I appreciate it, Giorgio.
that's so cool. And I think that's all for now. Thank you very much for everyone who had stayed with us and will watch this later. Let us know your feedbacks. Hit that subscribe button. Share with your friends. And that's it. Good night, good morning to anyone in the world. So have a great day. Bye.